Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I'm your host, Wendy Corner, and this podcast is for you if you are an author. You have your page, you've got that sorted out. Now, some of the people who come on this show and some of the people who listen are also speakers. They've done both the page and the stage. Sometimes they started on the page and went to the stage. Sometimes they started on the stage and went to the page. Either way, they've done both. And there are also people that I'm interviewing who got the page, but they're not quite ready for the stage yet. So I think we've covered all bases. So welcome. I'm sure that includes you as well. Okay, well, today I have the joy and privilege of interviewing the lovely Louise Harris, who is in the United States on the East Coast, I believe.
Yes, yep. St. Petersburg, Florida. Thank you, Wendy. I'm happy to be here. And
great. Well, I mean, I was going to do a bit of an introduction, but you know what? I think I'll leave it to Louise. Louise, tell us a bit more about you and how you've got to where you are now.
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I published my first poem at age 12, and I got paid for it. So I was actually a published author at age 12. I went into the University of Maryland College of Journalism because I knew I wanted writing to be part of my life, but I wanted a job, so I didn't want to just go into creative writing.
Okay.
But I also went into journalism because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be able to tell people what they needed to know. So I went to Maryland, and when I graduated, and I became an editor, and I've had my own business, Last Research and Editing, since 1992. I've also worked full-time at newsletter publishers. I worked for full-time at a small book publisher, and I also have done online things. So I've pretty much run the media gamut. I even interned in a TV, and I worked for a radio wire service. So I pretty much
boxes.
Yes, I've hit them all, and that's how I can help aspiring writers, because I have done a little bit of everything.
Cool.
So, but what my passion is my fiction.
Right.
So the editing pays the bills, but then I write my fiction just because I want to. And that's where we were talking before you started recording about my titles and how they're all 1776.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that, well, there's a couple reasons. The first book was 1776 Scroll of Secrets. And when I was getting that published, I went with a print-on-demand publisher.
Okay.
And they asked me for a list of title options, and I gave them all these lists, and 1776 was on there, and they said, that's the one we're going to use. And I like it because all of my books are set in Philadelphia, and they're not set in revolutionary time. They're set in modern day.
Oh.
But I have a tie back to the Revolutionary War.
Right.
1776 bed and breakfast, for example, the house that she owns, that is the inn, was built in 1776.
Got it.
And Soldier, which is my newest one, 1776 Soldier, that one is actually about, in modern day, the main character is he's in the U.S. Army, but he's also in the HVAC program, and he's learning to be an HVAC technician, but he's doing it through the Army. And
he's learning to be a what technician?
HVAC. Well, okay, heating, air conditioning, and ventil. It's called HVAC. The United States.
Thank you. This is an international podcast, so thanks for clarifying.
I understand. I always tell my clients not to use acronyms because they're different in different parts of the world. So anyway, I apologize for that. And the main female character is a chef at the 1776 Inn. This book, the newest one that came out October 23rd of last year, it's actually one that goes back and forth in time. So it starts in present day, but it goes into the past through a journal and letters. And it's the first time I ever did that. And it was actually quite fun and challenging, but I really liked doing that. Because it was challenging.
Historical research to do, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was challenging because I had to figure out how to do it. I didn't know how I could go back and forth like that. I didn't know, because that's why I write in present day. It's a lot easier. You know, I know what's around. But by going back in the past, I had to figure out how would the people of 2023 know what was happening in 1776. So that's where I came up with the letters and the journal. So Lady Arabella is an ancestor, and she's actually an ancestor of both my FBI agent and of the main male character, Jake, because she married Jake's ancestor. So that's why she became an ancestor to both. And then
you did have fun, didn't you?
Yes. So I have that in the book, Lady Arabella's journal. And then for the male side, I have letters from Zebulon, Captain Zebulon, and to Lady Arabella, but also to his brother and to his mother. So I have letters so that I can tell the whole story. And that's how I came up with that.
Nice. Cool.
But one of the challenges that I had, though, was I was writing in a journal, and things that were like people talking to her wouldn't necessarily be in a journal, but I put it in a journal because I had to have dialogue. So, but that was one of the challenges I had. Okay, well, how do I get people to talk to her? So, but you do what you have to do.
And also changing up the language as well, because obviously the language would have been different back in 1776.
Yes, I did try to keep it as standard as possible so that I didn't have to deal. But you're right, there were certain things like I had to say bodice instead of dress, or there was other words that I know from reading those novels. I know what those are, so I use them. Yeah. So, and that actually brings me to another point for new authors. You have to read, especially in your genre. You have to read so that you know what you can write about. Because if you don't read your genre, you're not going to succeed. So,
yeah. Well, on the historical novels, I've read a lot of the Outlander series, and they started off about that thick, and they got really thicker. I've moved from Perth to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I have a 20-kilo weight limit. So sadly, those books have been left behind because the further into the series you go, the fatter they get.
Yes. It's like the Harry Potter series, they start out real thin and then they're like this thick by the time you're done.
That's it. I mean, so because when I saw the series, somebody recorded the series for me, the first one, because I don't have Netflix or anything like that. And I'm looking at this and going, well, they got Jamie right, but Claire, no, where's the unruly hair? Anyway, I love the idea of going backwards and forwards. Yeah. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Well, the thing is, there's a murder that happens in 2023. The main female character, Roxy, her full name is Roxanne, but she goes by Roxy. Her aunt, who she never met, is murdered. And her murder actually links back to Lady Arabella's father, who gets murdered in 1776. So they're connected, and that's one of the reasons why I was going back and forth, because of the two murders that are connected.
Well, how exciting to read. So this is a novel that you put out in October last year.
Yes.
Yeah? October 2023. For people watching this at any time in stage, let's put a date on it. October 2023.
23, right. And it's my most recent. I also, as I mentioned, 1776 Scroll of Secrets came out in 2006. Then 1776 Bed and Breakfast came out in 2009. And then my third one is 1776 Musket, which we actually didn't talk about, but that one is about a musket that turns into a bomb. But it's actually Zeb's father's musket, and then it becomes a bomb. So that one came out in 2017. So
you had a bit of a gap between 2009 and 2017.
Yes, I'm not one of those romance novelists that can crank them out like every few months. There's a new it takes me a few years to actually create one, and I have no idea what my next one's going to be. I don't even have a title for it. Usually when I'm doing the process, I will come up with a title, and then the plot will eventually come up. But for the next one, I don't even have a title, so I don't know. I know the main character is going to be Maggie, who is the housekeeper at the inn.
And so we're still keeping with the 1776 inn.
Yeah, a lot of the plots happen at the inn. It just makes it convenient. And in Bed and Breakfast, there's a lot of things that happen, but Buck is an FBI agent, but you don't know that until the end of the book. And now I'm giving it away. So
Spoiler.
You can edit that out. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, because he's an FBI agent, that's why a lot of my future books happen at the end, because he's the FBI agent. So and he lives at the end. But anyway, I know it's going to be about Maggie, and then I'm thinking I have a character named Donovan, and I'm thinking he might be a football player. Because one of the other things about me is I love the Eagles, and I love football, so I tend to put that in my books periodically. So
right, and of course, back in 1776, American football had not been invented.
No.
And if anything, it was what you guys call soccer and
Brits but I think that even was in the 1800s. Soccer? I think in the 1700s the sport was horses and hunting.
Polo.
Yeah, and polo. So the other things come out later, but anyway, I don't really. As I said, for the next one, I don't have a plot. I'm probably going to start working, and I actually am working. I have a children's series in addition to my adult series. And the children's series is Notorious Nick, and the first book is already out. That came out in 2017. It was the only year, 2017 was the only year I actually had 2 books come out. But anyway, Notorious Nick is about a 9-year-old wizard who has hyperactive magical malady. It is based on my son, who has ADHD and a bunch of other stuff. And the 9-year-old wizard has a bunch of other stuff too. But the fun thing about him is that the school is being controlled. The villain is the superintendent of the school.
Right.
And that's also because I've had some bad run-ins with superintendents.
Yes, got it. It's quite a bit of a cathartic exercise on this one.
It definitely is. Anyway, so the superintendent has this mind control spell And because of his ham, he's the only one who can not be inflicted by the mind control, because his mind goes all different ways anyway from the hyperactive magical malady. And so the second in that series is Notorious Nick and the horrible hurricane. The first one's terrifying tornado, and the second one's horrible hurricane. So that's actually, I'm working on that. I'm up to chapter 6 on that book. So that's probably going to be my next one that comes out.
Okay, so you've got these writing projects that are going alongside your editing business. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
What I do is when I write, when I'm done working for the day, then I will write a chapter of my fiction.
Sure. Okay. So it's all about the words for you, isn't it? Your words have power. Is absolutely where you're at.
That is, yes.
In terms of speaking, how much speaking work do you do in relation to promoting your books when they come out, and also your editing work?
Well, I do try to do local events, so I will speak at local places and get my name in a local area. And I have found actually that it is very important to build your following locally first before you try to branch out. And I usually tell that to clients and people that I meet and aspiring writers. But my speaking kind of started many years ago when I had this idea that I could teach some of the things that I have learned over having a business for more than 30 years. So I started having classes, and I was actually, one of my clients, we did a barter where I would write her press releases and then she would give me her space, because she had a shared office space with a conference room, and I could hold my class in her conference room.
Cool.
And so that's where I started getting confidence about some of the things that I know and started really speaking. Because and my biggest class attendance I had was intro to social media, because I met all these business owners that had no clue of how to use social media, and they were always asking me questions. So I had a class, and that was my biggest attendance class. And the second biggest one was video marketing.
Right. And were these were in-person classes, were they?
These were all in-person classes. This was before COVID, when everything shut down. And so I was doing these classes like once a month, and I'd have people come in, and it was working really well. And then people stopped coming, and so I didn't want to waste my time. And then I found some online sites that offer that you can put yourself on there and do classes online. So I started doing that. And then when I meet people in networking and they ask me to speak, then I speak. So that's where the speaking kind of, where my books kind of transitioned to speaking. It was really through networking, and people say, I need a speaker for this. And I've been spoken at a lot of writers association. I spoke in Maryland when I lived there, and I spoke in Arizona, and I spoke and now I'm speaking online in Connecticut. In fact, I have another one where the Connecticut Authors Association is going to have me do a Zoom. So that's where I do my speaking. Is
Great. And when you do your book launches, I'm thinking of your fiction book launches, do you do book signings and readings?
Well, the problem with the book signings is, having been in the publishing business, I know how it works. So the bookstores are reluctant to have you do book signings because they can't really attract the people anymore. 20 years ago, it was very easy to have a book signing where they could get 20 people in, and then they could sell, a handful of those books and make a profit of having you come in. But now it is very hard to get a number of people to attend a bookstore and then and even best-selling authors, I've actually heard this from various sources, that even best-selling authors are having hard time getting people to show up in the bookstore for their books. That, people go online to buy books now. They're not going to bookstores. So they're not necessarily willing to go to a book signing in a bookstore. However, I have done some of them. I have done some library things too, and I do pretty well at them. But what I actually do better is craft shows, and people look at me and like, why are you selling books at a craft show? But here's the thing.
Show, right? Yes.
Craft shows.
Yes.
Yeah, especially around Christmas time, because you will have crochet, you'll have art, you'll have pottery, you'll have like 5 of them, and then there's me, and I'm the only author, and then and books make really great Christmas presents. So I tend to do those events more than I do book signings. Well, and I still sign the books, but
well, this is the fun thing. I'm one of the guys that I've worked with. He was part of an author program that actually had people going to appear in supermarkets.
Again, same issue, because it's a novelty. They don't necessarily see. And I ghost wrote 2 cookbooks. My client is dyslexic, so she couldn't do it herself. Plus, she also doesn't know the computer. It drives me a little bit crazy. But anyway, so I actually had book signings set up for her in restaurants. Because of the cookbook. And so that worked out for her. So yes, anytime you can be unique in where you're selling your books, the more successful you're going to be.
Absolutely. We had, I was in 2 books last year, one that I was a contributor to, the other one I not only contributed to, I curated it. And when we had the first book, the lady who curated it, I think there were 22 authors in it. And we had 6 of us in the same place in Perth in Australia. So we hired out the lecture theatre at the State Library of Western Australia. And we did book readings and we did book signings. And I said to the other 5 ladies, look, I'd like to gift you some coaching on how to read from stage. And oh boy, they did such a phenomenal job as a result of the quick session I'd done with them. I mean, one of them turned around and said, I've been Wendy'd. Okay. I can live with that one. But the point was, I really wanted them to get away from the sort of Muppet style of reading like that. And every one of them really connected deeply with what they'd written and then able to bring that out. And that's one of the things that the feedback from the audience was, I want to read the rest of it now. I've got your voice in my head. I want to read the rest of it. Which is why I think it's so important for authors to actually speak out their own words.
Right. Actually, when I do the craft shows, because I just am standing there with a booth and it's not really a reading type of thing, I get to talk about the book, and that gets them more interested in it. So I definitely agree with you. We
got to be out there and doing things slightly differently. I mean, one of the things that, as I mentioned in the introduction to the podcast, is that some authors are a little reluctant, particularly if the business authors have put their heart and soul into getting their story out there. And it's been a growth situation. It's been a cathartic situation. And now you want me to talk about it?
Right. It's the next step in therapy, though.
Well, it is.
If you're writing a business book, the only place you're going to sell it is to other business people. So you might as well go out and talk about it. But you know what? I'll tell you, I meet so many authors who, while they're writing it, refuse to tell people the plots of what they're writing. In fact, I'm in negotiations with ghostwriting, and I asked her, well, what's the story about? And she said, I'm not telling you till you sign an agreement. And I was just like, ugh, because they don't get that they need to start the buzz while they're writing it, not after it's published. And even if I take her plot points, it's a totally different story than what she's writing. You know, I'm not going to steal her plot, but they don't seem to get that, and that frustrates me. Yeah, it's like, it's fine, but no, books are meant to be shared, so you want to share it.
Well, I mean, funny you pick it out, not funny, but absolutely, I would echo that point. I'm away from Australia probably for a good year, and I'm in the process of writing a book. My life with 20 kilos. That's my weight limit.
Right.
This is a book aimed primarily at speakers who are on the road, and some of us still are on the road. What do we need to live an abundant life away from home? And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at it. I believe we're triune beings, so body, mind, and spirit.
Spirit, right.
So I'm talking about it. We've got 20 kilos. What do you physically need to carry with you? Because you've got to have your business gear, you've got to have your speaking gear. Don't forget the shoes, all of those sort of things. But then also, if you're going to be doing social media stuff, and let's face it, everybody has to do the social media stuff around the bringing people on board. You're going to take your laptop, you're going to have a decent mic, you're going to have a webcam, you're going to have a ring light. What are the other things that you need to carry with you? So those are the things I put in my backpack. The mindset stuff, oh my word, what do you need to leave behind? Because I tell you, I've been growing phenomenally as a result of this exercise. And thirdly, the spiritual side. Now, I'm an active Christian, and for the first time in my life, I'm living in a country that doesn't even pretend to be Christian.
Christian, right.
So the UK is still nominally Christian. The Australia still pretends. But Malaysia, oh no. First religion, Islam. Second, Hinduism. Thirdly, Buddhism. And comes in Christianity. So I'm not asking people to take on my belief system, but I'm asking them to consider, what are you doing when you're on the road to maintain and deepen your relationship with whoever you consider to be your higher power?
Right.
And what I'm now doing is I have both a Facebook page and an Instagram channel, and I'm dropping in every day little comments about what's going on. So hello, building the following now.
Right.
So that when it comes out, I will be doing living my page to stage. Where are we? Down on there. Living my page to stage, because I'm showing people how it's done.
Exactly. And
be strategic.
You're not afraid that somebody's going to take it. It's part of you, and you're sharing part of you. And I think that's important. But so many people, as you said in your intro, are afraid. They want to hold it all together. And those are the ones that are usually not successful, because they're not really willing to share. Now, I believe that God gave me the gift to write, and I believe everything I write comes from God, and it's my duty, being a gift from God, to share it with others. So, and to give them the joy. And that's why I write romance novels, because they provide joy. And they usually do not have a sad ending. They usually have a happy ending where the two get together. And usually people don't die, although a couple of my books people have died, but usually the villains die in my book. I don't kill off characters that people love. I'm not going to do that. So.
I mean, you've got an FBI agent in there, so you're going to have some sort of intrigue and
I do. It's not. I write romantic suspense, so there's always the suspense element. And yes, I have an FBI agent, and there's always something. The last book about the murder, he gets involved because the murder happens at an embassy, and it's even though there really aren't any embassies in Philadelphia, but I make it up. So, but anyway, even he admits in the book, FBI doesn't even have jurisdiction. It would be the French police, because it's a French embassy. But then I write that the French police asked the FBI to do it. So I make sure I cover those, because I don't want people to say, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, somebody will pick holes in it. Mm, mm, definitely, definitely.
And in one of my other books, I had to ask a question. It was a judge asking a question of a witness, just so I could clarify to the reader why I was doing it.
Love it, love it. Well, that's the point, isn't it? If you're writing fiction, you can tie in all these ends as part of the story. It's wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. I'm curious. I've got one of my cousins is also a fiction writer, and she has a whole wall of sticky notes that she does the plot development on these sticky notes and character development and all of this and ooh, okay. She likes to see it out there.
I know people that do that. I don't do that. I actually know the beginning and I know the end, and then what happens in the middle, I kind of just let the story flow, and whatever happens. But I actually have started doing a spreadsheet because I was getting confused on the character's color, eye color, hair color. And halfway through the book, I wouldn't remember which character was blonde and which one was redhead. So I have learned from other best-selling authors that having a spreadsheet does help that. So I do.
Those little markers in there. Yes. Beautiful.
Yes. So now I can refer back to my spreadsheet and say, oh, okay, that person has blue eyes, and that one, so the main characters, I don't usually have an issue. It's usually the secondary characters that I can't remember, So,
they don't fit
I'm doing a little of both. So I am doing a little organized, but mostly I write the flow, and actually that's one of the things that I tell a lot of my clients is that books have to flow. And some of my I had a client, he wrote a book about back pain and different ways of treating back pain, and he's had several surgeries, and he was recommending against surgeries because of what happened to him. But he brought the original manuscript to me in shattered. I mean, there was like a part of his story was here, and then he would go off on a tangent about that. And I teased him by saying that I was Dr. Frankenstein and I was creating this monster out of his book. But often that's what I have to do to make it flow. I have to take it apart and put it back together so that it flows, because a lot of people don't understand that concept, that a book has to flow from point A to point Z. So,
and those transitions are really important, aren't they? I mean,
they're
picking
very
up on
important.
that point, when I work with speakers, when I work with speakers, getting that flow together, we have to have some structure in there. And I work with a lot of people who are spiritual in outlook. They like to have things spontaneous.
Yes,
they're downloading
people. Yes,
and I go, well, yes, you can download because you want to go with the flow, and they pick up on that word flow. Yes, I said, well, you want to flow like a river, don't you? Yes. Does the river have banks? Yes. I said, what if the river overflows its banks and it goes a bit muddy? And yeah, if you don't have those banks in place through which to flow, you are going to get stuck in the mud. And I can tell you, if you as a speaker get stuck in the mud, your audience is definitely going to be confused.
Right. Yeah. And tune you out. And if they're online watching it, they'll just close off and go to another one.
Yep.
But if they're in person, they'll start looking at their phone, or they'll look at their watch. When is this going to end? And that's another thing that me as a speaker is always conscious of. I don't like to talk very long because I don't want to bore them. So I always keep my speeches to about 20 minutes and then 10 minutes for questions. I don't want to go too long because I know, as somebody who has sat through boring things, I don't want to be that person.
Well, do you know this? There's the reason that TEDx talks are an 18-minute max, because coming from out of MIT, which is where they originated, they'd done the research as to how long people could sit and focus. Now,
right.
yes, you've got the likes of Brené Brown, who I think they've let her go on for 23 minutes at one point. But hello, if your name's Brené Brown and you've got the audience exactly where you want them, that's a slightly different matter.
That matter, yeah.
But generally, when I've been working with TEDx clients, it's been a case of 18 minutes is your absolute max. You are aiming for between 12 and 15.
Right.
That way you've got a bit of wriggle room should you slightly go off piste.
Mm-hmm.
Because the event managers, and I can tell you that they look at their watch and go, oh,
Yeah.
you've got to be on time, start on time, finish on time. What goes on in the middle, that's down to you. But as far as the event manager is concerned, start on time, finish on time, go.
Yes.
And
Makes
promote.
sense. Yes, makes sense.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so Louise, let's recap. You started your zone of genius with words age 12 when you got published as an author, as a poet. Beautiful. And I'm wondering, you as an American lady, did you have to do presentations through your school, through your schooling?
Yeah, sometimes. Ours were more written though.
Okay.
We usually had in high school, one paper a year would have had to be presented to the class. I think it's more common now to have more of those because I know my daughter, when she went through high school, she had to present quite often. There's a lot more team projects in the United States where you have to work as a team. And but when I went to school, I would write a paper, turn it in, and then one or two during the school year I would have to present.
Okay.
So it wasn't that many, but we did have to do a couple. Yeah.
That's very different because certainly growing up in the UK, we had nothing like that. So when I've heard people who are from America, and I believe Canada as well, who've said, oh, I froze on stage because I got scared when I was however old they were, and I got booed and the kids were throwing stuff at me and therefore I wasn't going to go on stage anymore. And I'm going, okay, I can understand that one. But
well,
that whole experience was totally alien to me.
Yeah, it was not usually done like entire school. You usually presented it just to your class.
Your class, yes.
So then it's only 30 kids that are looking at you. And that person that told you that they make fun of you, yeah, that's absolutely true. But when the teacher is making every single one of the people in the class to do it, then it becomes a balance of, we all have to do it or we don't get a good grade. So, and I was always the high achieving type of student, which is probably why I had a daughter who was also a high achieving type of student. So for me, I always wanted the A, so I did the extra work to get the A. So,
so that was my point, that a lot of people from North America have had the experience of doing some presentation as a child. In the UK, that's not generally, unless you go into drama or you want to do something like that.
Right.
So what I'm hearing from you then is that the writing came first.
Yes.
Then the speaking came kind of as a result of, well, I want to share what I've done with the writing so that other people can do it as well. So you did your training, your facilitating, your teaching work.
Right.
And from there, you've also now done virtual stuff, because let's face it, we're all doing virtual stuff these days.
Right.
As well as maybe doing some, and you are still doing some in-person stuff. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and I've also done, I've done virtual, where I'm just standing up in front of a podium, but I've also done in person, I'm just standing up in front of a podium.
Yeah, yes, exactly. There are slightly different styles and therefore different skill sets required when you're doing in person, when you're doing virtual, when you're doing podcasts. So this again, audience, is where I'm suggesting to you that if your idea of public speaking is standing on a stage with a microphone and going, yeah, and then you don't want to do that, you don't have to.
Have to, right?
Really don't have to. A podcast is a stage.
A YouTube channel. I actually tell all my clients who have a book that they should have a YouTube channel and should be posting videos. They can be any kind of videos. I have a client who wrote a book about discrimination in the workplace. And we set up interview type. Because I'm a journalist, I can interview him. So I was the journalist asking him questions about different aspects of his book, and then we would post them on YouTube. My chef client that I mentioned, I have a YouTube channel for her where she's cooking and, you know, creating recipes and doing a cooking show. And I told her that was very important. And in both cases, having that video presence did help sell the books.
Definitely. I mean, I was talking about the importance of actually getting out there and talking about your book. One of the ladies I've had on the podcast, I think she was in the original lineup that we've launched with. She put her book out in 2017 and it became an international bestseller in 2023. And I said, so how come? Because usually people will have the big launch and then it peters off. I said, what was your secret sauce there? She said, I got out and talked about it. Any possible opportunity, I spoke about my book.
Look,
I had it with me all the time. Whenever anybody asked me about who I was, I went, I've got a book out. And she would speak about it. She got onto podcasts. She actually developed her own, as you say, YouTube channel. And that's where her sales gradually increased. Her community increased. Her fan base, as you were saying about having your fan base, having people wanting to follow you long before the book actually comes out. Beautiful. Right. So I've got to ask you.
I once sold 4 books to my gynecologist.
That's a tale in and of itself, isn't it?
Well, it was my first book, and you know, they always ask you how you doing, what are you doing this year versus last year, and I said, well, my new book, I have published my first book, and then I went into what the book was about, and then my doctor said, well, you know, I have this book club and I need 4 copies. So do you and I happen to have had them in my car. So I sold them right that day.
Always have a box of books in the car. Yes, I did the same with the dentist.
Yep.
Only one, but that's fine.
You just never know unless you ask the questions.
Yes.
Or that you talk about it, you know, so it's really important. I always kick myself, but I once had a banker, I was telling her about my business, and she wanted to start a blog and she needed a writer for the blog, but I didn't have my card with me, and it has always been, you know, one of my regrets, but I had just given out my last card, so I had to order more, and so I lost that one because I didn't have a card with me. But
what I now do with people is I don't bother with cards at all, because I find that cards get filed and forgotten. Social media is where people are at. So if they're a professional, I'll say, right, what's your LinkedIn? And we do the scan code thing. So we immediately do that. I've now got a record of who that person was, because that's the most recent contact. When I get back to base, I follow up with them.
Right. And so, I do that too. I was just, you know, this was several years ago.
Back in the day.
Yeah. When you didn't have the digital business card, you actually hand out. But I have business cards, but mostly what I hand out is a postcard. It's a 4x6 postcard.
Right.
And it says something on the top. Why would you hire a writer for marketing? And then it gives all these instances where you would hire a writer. And I have actually gotten more business from that $80 investment than anything else I've ever done.
Yes.
That has been my biggest investment.
Yeah, brilliant.
Return on investment, I mean.
Yes. Okay, so Louise, what are you working on at the moment? You've said there's something percolating. You haven't quite got, you've got some characters worked out, but you don't have a title, and you're not there. So that's on the percolation.
Yeah. I still have to let something pop into my head. And as I mentioned, I am working on devastating, well, it was devastating hurricane, but I'm changing it to horrible hurricane because I like the alliteration.
Oh, yes. So that's Notorious Nick, isn't it?
Right. That's Notorious Nick and the horrible hurricane.
When are you planning on publishing that one?
Probably next year.
Okay.
Because as I said, I'm only on chapter 6, so, and I write it when I don't have a lot of other projects to do. So
Sure, sure.
in between.
Okay, well, audience, just to fill you in, the show notes on our YouTube channel are dynamic. So when I have authors who've got something coming out, they let me know when it is, and we go back and we update the show notes. And I will also pop something up on my socials going, that podcast episode quoted. Oh, look, they've got something else coming up, particularly if you can then give me a link. So that's something to bear in mind, audience, that we have dynamic show notes. So all of the best way of getting hold of Louise, all of those links will be in the show notes as well.
Great.
So as we're winding up then, Louise, can you tell me, how do you take your words and embody them when you go from page to stage?
Well, like with the book, where I follow the flow of the book, I kind of do that on the stage too, or on a podcast, or as you can see, we've had a conversation about a lot of things. So I kind of follow what is the flow of like the audience, and then I just speak to that. And that's usually how I do it. I do want to leave some wisdom to authors who are starting out. One of the questions I get a lot is, I'm writing a book, it's so daunting. And what I always tell people is, it doesn't have to be daunting. Just break it down into manageable chunks. I mentioned that I write about a chapter. And that's what I tell people. If you do 10 pages a day, that's less, that sounds less than, oh, I have to come up with a 250-page book.
Yes.
And if you also remember that books are 6 by 9 or 5.5 by 8.5, that's really half a page that you're writing. So 10 half pages a day. Or one chapter a week is usually what I do. And that's when I'm ghostwriting, that's what I do, is one chapter a week. And then it's not daunting. And then you're more willing to do it. Yes. But when you get into this, oh, it's so big of a task. And this is not just for writing, it's for business as well. Mm-hmm. You get overwhelmed and then you shut down. And I know for me, yes. And for me, when I have a big project and I don't really know how to start it, I shut down because it feels overwhelming. So I just say, don't make it daunting. Take it a little at a time and it'll work. So,
like eating the elephant, one bite at a time.
Bite at a time, yes. I have a business consultant friend that says that all the time.
Love it, love it. Thank you so much, Louise. You've given us such a rich vein of conversation and insights into your fiction, into your writing, into your editing, and the ghostwriting as well, which is something that, again, I get a number of people who say, oh, I've got a book in me, but I can't do this because. I go, okay, why is the because? Oh, well, I'm dyslexic. Well, have you heard of voice recorders? I know a number of people who have spoken their book out, shoved it through something like Otter or any voice to text software, and hello, yes, it still needs to be edited, and that's where the likes of your skills come in on top of those predetermined ones. And of course, you then require to do the developmental editing, and as you said, Frankenstein, and going, let's look at this in a little bit of a different way. But the point is, there is now no excuse for not writing a book.
Unless you make one.
Unless you make it one. Yes, exactly. You have a reason, you have an excuse. No, just get on and Nike it. Do it. Yeah, love it.
I want to thank you. I really enjoyed this. This was fun. So, and all of you listening, I hope you get those books out and talk about them. Make sure you talk about them.
Absolutely. So thank you, Louise, for sharing with us your From Page to Stage. For now, everyone, bye from us.
Bye.